Hi there. Today I want to talk about an upcoming astrological aspect that'll be happening this next week on Wednesday, on the 11th, at least here in Brasilia. So, very early on Wednesday, we're going to have a full moon. But then later that day, we're going to have what's called a sextile between Mercury in Cancer and Venus in Taurus, right? So that means that on the ecliptic, on the sun's path, the Venus will be 60 degrees away uh, from Mercury, and this is seen as a harmonious aspect of cooperation between these two planets and the things that they represent. They'll both be in what are called nocturnal or feminine signs, Cancer and Taurus, and Venus is especially very well in Taurus. She's in her domicile, she's at home there, and she'll be supporting Mercury. They'll be in sync, as they're both in nocturnal signs. And so Venus and all that she represents of beauty, love, creation, and Mercury and all that he represents of communication and travel and young people and what all their significations will be working well together. And so I thought that in order to talk about this, I'd read and comment from a section of Proclus's commentary on Plato's Timaeus. So this is volume 5 in the Cambridge translation. And here he discusses the planets, and there's actually a fair amount of astrological lore in it. So I thought I'd read from this text and explain a few things, because he talks about Venus, Mercury, and the Sun and how they all belong together. In part, he's trying to answer two questions. One is that Plato, in his Timaeus and the Republic, he has an order of the planets which isn't the order of the planets that was later more prevalent amongst astronomers and astrologers, right? So Plato had an order of the planets ascending from Earth of the Moon, the Sun, then Mercury, Venus, then Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. So he put the Sun right after the Moon, but later people would use a so-called Chaldean order, where you have the Moon, then Mercury, Venus, the Sun, then Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And so there's a question about, like, why does Plato have a different order? And he's trying to explain what the connection is then between the Sun and these two other planets. But generally, he wants to know, why is it that these planets all run about the same speed? So the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, they all take about a year to go around the Sun's path on the around the Earth. So, I mean, of course, the Sun takes exactly a year, because that just is what a year is. It's the time that the Sun takes. But Venus and Mercury are always really close to it in the apparent sky. Now, of course, we explain this just by their order with regard to the Earth. They're they're within the orbit of the Earth. They're closer to the Sun than it. So what appears to be the Sun's motion around the Earth is, of course, just the Earth's motion around the Sun nowadays, and that also then manifests, as it were, as a motion that seems to take about the same amount of time for Venus and Mercury, which are between the Earth and the Sun. But so that's how we explain the phenomena. But there was like a metaphysical question about, like, why do these three things always go together? Why are their cycles is somehow in sync? They're not entirely in sync. Sometimes Mercury and Venus are ahead of the Sun. Sometimes they're behind. They both have retrograde motions where they seem to, as it were, stop their yearly progress in the sky and start going backwards. Mercury does this 3 times a year, and So there's a question about, like, why do these three divine causes go together? And so I'm going to read from his commentary an explanation that he derives from a previous philosopher, Iamblichus, about these things. So he writes, so if you have the English translation, this is on page 132, 133 of that translation. In the Greek, it starts around page 65, line something like 22. Okay, so here goes. But Venus and Mercury are above the sun since they are solar in character and collaborate with it, working together with the sun towards the completion of the things that are wholes. Now, a couple of things. What the translators render here as collaborate in the Greek is to be co-artificers, co-engineers of the things down here. And they say that, and then they translate that they work together with the sun towards the completion of the things that are wholes. Now, what are these things that are wholes? The translators think it's just about the seasons and so on. But first of all, the things that are wholes can just be the universe. This expression, ton holon, it can just mean everything. But it can also mean specifically those things that are universal. So not things that just happen once, like individual events and individual people and animals and things, but also universal things, so like species of animals and wholes that include many animals and things like cities and populations and nations. So they're saying that the sun, that Venus and Mercury work together with the sun in sustaining these universal things. And the sun was often mentioned in this regard because of something that Aristotle wrote. So Plato had this idea that things down here are what they are, or like the things that we perceive are what they are, thanks to the, what do you call their forms, or we could say the intelligible essences that we can grasp just through thought and insight about what they are. So, that there are human beings because of what it is to be a human being. In some sense, what it is to be a human being isn't just something that we abstract after we have lots of experience with human beings, but rather it's a kind of divine principle in the world that sustains humanity in existence, right? So there are human beings because humanity itself is part of what it means to be present, what it means to exist. And Aristotle thought that no, that what keeps human beings around is actually human beings reproducing and the stability of the heavens, right? So it's not just human being that produces human beings, it's a human being and the sun that produces a human being. That was his, as it were, anti-Platonic slogan: a human being and a sun produce a human being. And so there was this connection, of the sun with the maintenance of species already. And so that's in the background of this expression, that they work together with the sun towards the completion of the things that are wholes. This is why they move, Proclus continues, at the same speed as the sun and are to be found around it, since they are co-contributors with the sun in creation. As we noted previously, they stand in opposition to the sun, and he means here not as strong as in opposed to them as astronomically, but just that they're grouped together and in contrast with it. Not merely due to the motion in the epicycles, as the mathematicians claim. So there was an explanation for their apparent movement, which relied on them all doing cycles around other cycles that all had the same center. So that's what he's talking about. Nor because the sun is responsible for revealing things that have been hidden, whilst Venus and Mercury are responsible for what is hidden, as the astrologers insist. Here, astrologer is astrologikoi in the Greek. And this about that the sun is revealing things we can understand because it's the source of light. Now, Venus and Mercury have to do with revealing thing. I'm sorry, not Venus and Mercury have to do with the hidden things, because they often disappear in the sky. Why do they disappear? Because they're always close by the sun, and when you get too close to the sun, you're no longer visible because you're never in the sky at night. You're always in the sky when the sun is also in the sky. That is during the day, and so you're not visible for certain periods of time. So the Venus and Mercury, it's a part of their motion that they spend parts of the year hidden from view, very close to the sun, and so they get associated with hidden things, in contrast to the sun, which is associated with light. For these reasons, too, they always go together. But also, Proclus will add Iamblichus's idea, because of the divine power which Plato himself mentions. The power of the sun is something wondrous and unsurpassable, and for this reason incommensurable in its own right, while the powers of Venus and Mercury shine symmetry upon and good mixture upon that which the sun also illuminates, due to the fact that they always attend upon him. Now here there's something that you might not get because of how they chose to translate this. So incommensurable is asymmetros, right? So there is no common measure between the power of the sun, which is so great, and the measure of other things. So and what is the power of the sun? Not just to illuminate and to make clear, but to cause things, to bring them into existence, right? So we see that things grow during spring, and they are less active during fall and winter. So the sun has this capacity. Animals are active during the day and they sleep during the night. So the sun has this great power. But he says that it on its own is incommensurable. There's no common measure to it. And so, as it were, it just causes things to grow, but there's no order in that because it's so powerful. But then Venus and Mercury come in and they shine symmetry and good mixture. So they bring, on the one hand, symmetry here is symmetria, which means having a common measure. And it's associated, he'll make this clearer, with Mercury. So Mercury is a god to do with speech, with logos, also has to do with calculation and measures. So the sun, as it were, has this function of bringing a large amount of vitality into the world, but then that needs to be balanced out. And it's balanced out by Venus, which brings good mixture, beauty, and Mercury, which brings logos, measure, harmony, proportion. Right. So he sees this cooperation between and balance between what the sun does, all this vital energy, and what Venus and Mercury do, beauty and order. They make the solar creation harmonized, for both are responsible for association. Mercury is a partner in the creation of things that are diurnal or nocturnal and becoming male or female, while Venus possesses the power of binding things together and harmonizing what is separated. So here, both Mercury and Venus are responsible for association. So koinonia, the fact that things have something in common between them. Mercury has this, and they do this in different ways. So Venus, it's in a more obvious way. She binds things together, right? So she's a goddess of love and beauty and harmony. So it's binding things together. Mercury, it's because he is a god of communication. So he can be in either position. So this is what he says about him. He sometimes, in Hellenistic astrology, Mercury belongs to the party of the night, the nocturnal sect, and sometimes he belongs to the party of the day. Sometimes he's considered feminine, sometimes he's considered masculine. So he can occupy either position, and that also has to do something to do with the abstraction of reason and mathematics. This abstraction of you don't take into account the particularities of a situation, and so you can inhabit the many different positions in it. So that's how the order of Mercury causes association, causes community, whereas the order of Venus causes association, community by really binding things together, right? So that's what he's talking about, how they add to the solar creation harmony. And that's interesting because this suggests that this great power of the sun is on its own not something that's harmonized. It actually produces, maybe we might say, difference and abundance, but it needs to be then set in order, balanced out by these other two planets, by the actions of Mercury and Venus. He continues, you might also say that it is because the sun does not make use of retrogradation, progression, nor standing stationary in its movements, while Mercury and Venus do exhibit progressions, stations, and retrogradation. They have been allotted powers opposite to the sun on the basis of appearance. So he might say, this is also another reason why they have these different powers. So as I mentioned, the sun always just goes straight on its path around the zodiac throughout the year. So in the north during the summer, it's in Cancer and Leo, and at the end of the sun in Virgo, and during the winter, it's in Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So it just goes straight through all the signs. Whereas Venus and Mercury, they have this thing that they sometimes appear to stop in their progress through the signs and go backwards and go forwards. So these are these retrogradation, progressions, and standing stills that he's mentioned. And so he's saying, well, maybe this is a reason to think that they have these opposite powers to the sun. The sun is just this power that goes forward, that produces abundance, whereas they have these measures. They have these distinct periods of time that they break up their motion through, and so they cause things like order and harmony and organization. And perhaps, as we said earlier, he's referring to a previous book in the Timaeus commentary, these three planets have made a procession that is analogous to the primary three monads, truth, beauty, and symmetry, in the vestibule of the good from Plato's Philebus. Monad is a kind of cause in Proclus. A monad literally is just a unit that you use for counting, and that's a bit of the analogy that is saying here. So truth, beauty, and, well, what they translate here as symmetry could be better understood as proportion. These three are units that we use to define things, right? So like truth is this like clearest in truth, right? Where you have this idea of a thought or a statement really matching up, right? One-to-one with reality or whatever it's talking about. But things like beauty and symmetry are also kind of like units that are used for counting. Although here, this unit for counting is also a cause that makes things exist, right? He says, since these three planets are analogous to the aforementioned monads, units, which are together with one another, it is quite likely, right, they're together with one another, so truth, beauty, and proportion, they always go together. It's a metaphysical claim, can be discussed in another video. It is quite likely that they wish to be present with one another and to go around together. This is doubtless the reason they overtake and are overtaken, due to their creation together with one another and their collaborative efforts in creative works. Now, sometimes they move faster, sometimes slower, but yet it is not the case that when one goes quickly, the others do too. Or when one goes more slowly, the remaining ones go more slowly too, and so on. It is likely that the one moving quickly should overtake the other two who are moving more slowly, and again be overtaken in turn when it slows down. There is in fact a single cycle, but the parts of their cycles, because they differ with respect to speed and slowness, make them at various parts of the cycle be overtaken or overtake one another, different ones at different times. So that ends this section on Venus and Mercury. He has more things to say about these planets, and also he has stuff to say about the other ones in his text. And so in this last bit, he's saying, well, maybe if we think that each of these planets, Sun, Mercury, Venus, is an image of a different metaphysical principle, truth, proportion, and beauty, right? That's why they're always close together in the sky, and that's why They're always at sometimes one is ahead of the other and another is behind it. They all are acting together the way that truth, beauty, and proportion act together, and the way that as I said, beauty and proportion in some sense mold or moderate the great power of truth. And so that's what he has to say about this. I hope the sextile brings nice gifts for everyone. And I look forward to sharing more about Proclus. And you can, if you're interested in more about what I have to teach about astrology, you can take a look at the link below. Thanks.